Hi guys, so let's take a look at inflation and some of the key terminology as well as how inflation is actually measured in an economy. Firstly, what is inflation? Well, it is a sustained increase in the general price level. Okay, so it's how prices rise. Now, when prices rise, of course, this can pose problems because consumers' incomes may not necessarily keep up with those price increases, and as a direct consequence, their real purchasing power may diminish. Okay, so if real wages are actually keeping up with inflation, then inflation is likely to be less damaging to consumers. But that's a really important point. Nonetheless, let's have a look at the ways in which inflation is measured. And there's two crucial ones that you need to understand. The Consumer Price Index we'll look at in a lot more detail. Now this is a measurement of changes in the price level by taking a weighted average of prices of those within the consumer goods basket. So it uses a basket of consumer goods and services that consumers routinely purchase, and then works out the actual percentage change within those prices, and it also provides a weighted value depending upon the frequency with which you buy the good, or perhaps how expensive the actual good is if it's a one-off cost. Okay, and of course, as I said, we'll look at this in a lot more detail in a subsequent lesson. Now, the crucial difference with the CPI measurement is that this excludes housing costs. So the CPI measurement excludes housing costs, and as a direct result of that, it means that CPI inflation is often below that, often but not always below that of the retail price index. Okay. Now this CPI inflation is the Consumer Price Index, which is used for inflation targeting by the central bank and the Monetary Policy Committee at the Bank of England, and they target a 2% rate of CPI inflation. Okay, then we've got the Retail Price Index. So this is a similar measure to the CPI. However, the major difference is that RPI includes housing costs. So that really does give you the clear distinction between these two different alternate measures of inflation. One excludes housing costs and one includes housing costs. Housing costs, that includes rent, it includes mortgage payments, it includes council tax rates as well. So with council tax increases on the way, of course, it means that the RPI will actually increase directly because of that, but that will not have a direct influence on the CPI price level there. Okay, so those are our two key measurements of inflation, but there's some other key terminology you need to be aware of. Let's have a look now at deflation. Well, really, this is just the opposite. This sustained fall in the general level of prices within an economy. Okay, and deflation, it can have some potentially very, very damaging consequences for an economy. And we'll look at that again in another lesson. And then we've got this notion of core inflation. Now, core inflation excludes items that have volatile prices. So it excludes many commodities such as oil, whose prices can fluctuate, and that core inflation that can therefore help to actually remove the price volatility that may be experienced within certain commodities. Okay, and it's argued that perhaps targeting core inflation is a more achievable target for a central bank, because a central bank is going to have little control over perhaps oil prices. Okay, now when it comes to the causes of inflation, there's two crucial causes that you need to understand, and they really break down to demand pull and cost push. Demand pull is simply caused by aggregate demand being greater than the aggregate supply in the economy, and so therefore as a direct result of that, prices are pulled up by the level of demand. And then we've got cost push, where this is caused by rising input costs. Okay, so this could be petrol costs, it could be wages, it could be stock. Petrol and oil really does have a profound effect on inflation because all goods require distribution, of course, and transportation, with the exception of digital goods. So yeah, that really can have a big impact across the economy when oil prices change and when petrol prices change and so on. Okay, so that's inflation overall. There's some other terms that you may come across, such as disinflation, perhaps. Disinflation means that the actual level of inflation, while still positive, is gradually on the decline. And it's not as high as it once was, and the price rises rather aren't changing as rapidly as they were. So that's disinflation. And something else to be aware of throughout this unit is really the difference in anticipated and unanticipated, or expected and unexpected inflation. If inflation is expected, and yeah, there's good knowledge out there, then it means households, businesses, as well as the central bank can actually make policy decisions and make spending decisions in line with those expectations. However, if it's unanticipated, that can pose problems. Okay, and we'll look at those in great detail. Right, thanks guys.